sa mga magnanakaw sa PhilHealth, inuulit ko, hindi natatapos dito sa pagsuspinde o sa pagsibak sa inyo. Siguraduhin namin na mananagot kayo sa batas at makukulong kayo. As long as there are people like you in government, we will not stop in our efforts to remove rotten eggs like you who are destroying public service and the public's trust in government. Kung wala naman kayong kasalanan at wala kayong itinatago, hindi kayo dapat matakot.
The satanic fraud and evil of corruption in PhilHealth mafia is finally revealed. Panoorin po natin ang nakakagimbal na report ng Senate sa PhilHealth investigation. It is a truly a nerve-breaking point, if not in the Philippine history, but in a Senate history. Panoorin po natin ang buong buo, walang labis, walang kulang, dahil po napakahaba po nito. Pero kung hindi pa po kayo nag-subscribe, pindot na sa subscribe button upang maging updated kayo sa aking mga latest video. Panoorin po natin.
It may be a worse course of action for this chamber to sit idly by knowing what it knows now, how mismanaged PhilHealth is to cope with the rising cost of its health responsibilities to the Filipino people. Any reform in personnel and its organization cannot come from within its ranks when all had been tainted with suspicion, through active participation or inaction, in the conspiracy to bankrupt PhilHealth of its funds and resources. There is a specter that is haunting the Philippines, the specter of SARS-CoV-2. As of latest count, this virus has slain in its path nearly 3,500, rendered ill more than 200,000, and still counting. COVID-19 has left many families orphaned, grieving, and suffering. It has deprived an innumerable, left with no one to support them. The human cost is immeasurable. Compounding this despairing reality, the economy has suffered immensely. A heretofore unimaginable 45.5% adult unemployment at 27.3 million Filipinos, and a whopping 2.2 trillion in estimated economic losses. This virus-borne disease and the resultant suffering is more than enough to make a people fall on its knees in prayer and abject surrender. Alas for us, this is not the only disaster to be. As if this cataclysm that has befallen us is not devastating enough, we are made to suffer another catastrophe, man-made this time. The endemic corruption and gross mismanagement of PhilHealth, which is not, if not corrected or eradicated, will pose grave risks not only to health, but also the lives of all Filipinos. So the Committee of the Whole, which was constituted last July 28, 2020, conducted an inquiry in aid of legislation on the alleged rampant corruption, incompetence, and inefficiency in the PhilHealth, conducted 3 public hearings on the resolutions 461, 474, and 475 held August 4, 11, and 18. The nature of the 3 resolutions, Mr. President, included in the agenda of the hearings, hinted on the probable administrative and criminal culpability of some personalities from the PhilHealth Board, the President and Chief Executive Officer, Senior Vice President, Regional Vice Presidents, down to numbers of ranking officials of PhilHealth. These serious allegations have put into question whether there are indeed legitimate reasons that lead to the stepping down of no less than PhilHealth's anti-fraud legal officer after complaining about his delayed salaries presumptively after he started investigating the probable breach of some PhilHealth's ranking officials. The discussions during the hearings were both investigative and inquiries in aid of legislation intended to reform the administrative operations of PhilHealth. The conducted hearings also intended to look into the proposal to come up with sound recommendations to put an end to the allegation of corruption and put in place reforms in the administration of the country's premier healthcare provider through possible filing of bills to amend the PhilHealth law. The controversies surrounding PhilHealth have long been surfacing. It surfaced as early as 2015 that lead to the reported loss of billions of pesos due to some unscrupulous practices like ghost dialysis, unnecessary cataract surgeries, case upscaling, questionable rise in claims, bloated budget proposals for ICT projects, just to name some, Mr. President. In fact, sometime in 2018, PhilHealth employees all around the country simultaneously signed or staged a protest to denounce the corporation's widespread corruption and inefficient management of its operations. It is the main concern of the committee that the duty of the government to serve, protect, and promote the people's right to health and maintain honesty and integrity in the public service as guaranteed by the Constitution shall be upheld at all times. The principal consideration and objective of the Committee of the Whole in hearing the aforementioned resolution is to gather sufficient data and information that will serve as indicators on the need to reshuffle or to totally reorganize the entire PhilHealth bureaucracy, provide for stiffer penalties as a means of stopping the widespread frauds, as well as recommend to appropriate agencies in government to investigate and ultimately file the necessary charges to whoever is involved in the alleged malversation if necessitated. Moreover, the committee would like to determine the efficacy of the existing PhilHealth law with the hope of introducing administrative reforms on the ways and means to improve its operations and uphold its mandate in providing help for the Filipino people who are in dire need of medical assistance. So, Mr. President, after gathering necessary information to come up with a proposed legislation, the committee or your committee of the whole has the honor to submit the results of the 3 public hearings to the Senate with the following findings, conclusions, and recommendations. The series of hearings unearthed the following grave issues. Number 1, the interim reimbursement mechanism, legal basis or lack of it, and its shoddy or shady implementation. Second, the ICT project as an anatomy of corruption. Third, the PhilHealth financial status, specifically the alleged manipulation of PhilHealth's financial statements, earlier flagged by the Commission on Audit. Its actuarial life, examining further the claim that PhilHealth will die in 2021 or 2022. Fourth, irregularities in the legal sector. And fifth, the B. Brown Abitum dialysis centers. Let me start with the statement of facts on the interim reimbursement mechanism. This will be reimbursement mechanism or IRM, defined as, quote, a special privilege for the provision of substantial and to uneligible HCIs directly hit by a fortuitous event. Yung HCI po, yun yung healthcare institutions. Fortuitous event with clear and apparent intent to continuously operate and or rebuild the HCI in order to provide continuous healthcare services to adversely affected Filipinos. End of quote. This allows PhilHealth to grant advance payment up to 3 months to healthcare institutions to support their continuous operation. Now, Mr. President, PCEO Ricardo Morales cited paragraphs C, D, and J of Section 16 of Republic Act 7875 as amended, otherwise known as the National Health Insurance Act of 1995, as the legal basis for the implementation of the IRM. PhilHealth Circular 0034 Series of 2013, or the Guidelines on the Provision of Special Privileges to those affected by a fortuitous event, signed by then PCEO Alexander Padilla, served as the impetus for the IRM. Under the said circular, fortuitous events are described as acts of God, like floods or typhoons, or an act of man, such as rebellions, insurgencies, and wars. Based on the circular 2020-0007, the rationale of the IRM is premised on Section 1, letter P, Public Health Services of Republic Act 7875 as amended by Republic Act 9241 and RA 10606, otherwise known as the National Health Insurance Act of 2013. And I quote, "The government shall be responsible for providing public health services for all groups such as women, children, indigenous people, displaced communities, and communities in environmentally endangered areas, while the program shall focus on the provision of personal health services. Preventive and promotive public health services are essential for reducing the need and spending for personal health services." As clearly seen from the statement of the objectives of PhilHealth Circular 2020-0007, the same is intended to ensure continuous access to PhilHealth benefits and be able to provide substantial aid to HCIs in rebuilding their critically damaged healthcare system in order to provide continuous provision of healthcare services to all Filipinos adversely affected by fortuitous events. During the August 11, 2020 Committee of the Whole hearing, Attorney Roberto Labe Jr., the Corporate Legal Counsel, stated that there has been a decrease in patient census and increase of cost of hospitals, hence the IRM response. This is to ensure that hospitals will be able to continue its operations during the pandemic even if these hospitals have no or low COVID-19 cases. Now, Mr. President, the IRM has been implemented in the past to facilitate the recovery of affected HCIs to make them operational for members. In 2009, the payment scheme for IRM was implemented for accredited healthcare providers in NCR and Rizal province, which incurred destruction of facilities and equipment due to Typhoon Ondoy, as identified and validated by the Corporation's PC number 36 series of 2009. In 2017, the IRM was used to provide substantial aid in rebuilding critically damaged healthcare systems of accredited HCIs affected by armed conflict in Marawi under PC number 2170026. In January 2020, PhilHealth claimed that more than ₱1 billion was made available to accredited hospitals, primary care facilities, ambulatory surgical clinics, freestanding dialysis centers, and maternity package providers in the aftermath of the Taal eruption. This was based on a press release from them. On 20 March 2020, PhilHealth released PCR number 2020-007 on the implementation of the IRM for the COVID-19 response. Premised on the said circular, COVID-19 related IRM implementation appears questionable following its stated objective, and to quote, "to ensure continuous access to PhilHealth benefits and be able to provide substantial aid to HCIs in rebuilding their critically damaged healthcare system in order to provide continuous provision of healthcare services to all Filipinos adversely affected by fortuitous events." PhilHealth Circular number 2020-0007. What is noteworthy, Mr. President, in these previous IRM versions is the fact that HCI beneficiaries suffered serious infrastructure and recorded damages due to the occurrence of a fortuitous event. Thousands of claim records sustained flood damages that would have taken months to reconstitute. The situation demanded emergency payment arrangements to ensure the unimpeded provision of financial risk protection to members. Moreover, as differentiated from PHC 2020-0007, which authorizes PhilHealth to make advance payment to HCIs, in the three previous IRMs, PhilHealth did not advance any amount to any HCIs, but only ensured accelerated reimbursements of HCIs claim subject to certain conditions. Now, confronted with a copy of an unnumbered PhilHealth Board resolution during the second Senate Committee of the Whole meeting last August 11, 2020, PhilHealth Corporate Secretary, Attorney Jonathan Mangawa, referred to it as PBR or PhilHealth Board Regulation number 2515, which he said was adopted 31 March 2020, ratifying the interim reimbursement mechanism nationwide due to coronavirus disease, COVID-19. On 22 April 2020, disseminated through the Outlook mail of PhilHealth was the SOP, the Standard Operating Procedures on the releases of IRM. It must be noted that the SOP's effectivity was dated 21 March 2020. Now, it must be underscored that in all of the legal bases cited by PhilHealth officials, the reference for provision of health benefits pertains to regular benefit claims payments of PhilHealth. Paragraph C, D, J of Section 16, and displaced communities and communities in environmentally endangered areas. Paragraph O of Section 1, PhilHealth Circular 2020-0007. And it also mentions substantial aid to HCIs in rebuilding their critically damaged healthcare system adversely affected by a fortuitous event. Substantial aid, ha? Pakinggan mo mamaya kung magkano yung substantial aid. More so, in the prior implementation of IRM, corresponding circulars set the requirement for PhilHealth accreditation, sustained critical damage in infrastructure, and identification and validation of the corporation of the magnitude of damage, destruction of the HCIs. These circumstances are lacking or absent in the implementation of the present IRM in response to the pandemic, thus rendering the implementation void from the very beginning. The Standard Operating Procedures, or SOP, on the releases of IRM was only disseminated almost a month after Circular 2020-0007, or on 22 April 2020 through the Outlook mail of PhilHealth. Notwithstanding the late dissemination of the document, the effectivity of the SOP was retroactively dated 21 March 2020. Drawing from the late dissemination of the document, it is the committee's submission that the SOP was antedated to support and justify the immediate execution of MOAs or MOAs as early as March 23 and release of IRMs on March 25 to some favored HCIs. There were already 279 hospitals which received IRM funds as early as March 25 to April 22. If indeed the SOP, a requisite document in the implementation of the IRM, was belatedly enacted and signed on 22 April 2020 and made to apply retroactively in 21 March, then we submit that the IRM releases of these 279 hospitals prior to such time, 22 April 2020, were irregularly made as they did not have the SOP on how the same will be released and processed at the time. Another factor that contributes to our assumption of illegality in the enactment and implementation of the interim or the IRM by PhilHealth was the belated adoption by the PhilHealth Board of PBR 2515 entitled Resolution Ratifying the Interim Reimbursement Mechanism nationwide due to coronavirus disease. This resolution was only adopted by the board on 31 March 2020. Hence, we submit that PhilHealth does not have any legal justification when they implemented Circular 2020-0007 as early as 20 March 2020, which for all intents and purposes was considered an ultra vires act of the corporation. On the effectivity of the PhilHealth Circular 2020-007, Article 7 of the circular clearly states, this circular shall take effect immediately from its publication in a newspaper of general circulation, and 3 certified true copies had been furnished the Office of National Administrative Register, or ONAR, of the UP Law Center. Emphasis is made on the requirement for the certified true copies furnished to ONAR, ONAR, of UP for the circular's effectivity. Ang linaw. Upon the request of the Office of Senator Ping Lacson, the UP ONAR, or the UP Law Center, issued a certification that PhilHealth Circular 2020-0007 was filed on June 11, 2020. If we are to consider the effectivity or the effectivity date of IRM based not only from the publication in a newspaper of general circulation, but also on the submission of PhilHealth Circular 2020-0007 to ONAR, this would mean that the IRM effectivity is deemed valid only on 11 June 2020. Thus, we submit that the total IRM releases amounting to 14 billion 38,393,329 pesos and 14 centavos from March 25, the earliest date of the release, until June 9 was deemed illegal and invalid. Furthermore, Mr. President, SVP for Legal Sector, Attorney Rodolfo Jojo de Rosario, agreed that the IRM fund releases were illegal in the hearings conducted by both the Senate and the House of Representatives. He stated that it would appear that the IRM funds were not released based on the prerequisites set by the circular on publication and furnishing of copies to the ONAR. These submissions are supported by the case of Republic of Philippines versus Pilipinas Shell Petroleum Corporation, GR number 173918, where the Supreme Court ruled that both the requirements of publication and filing of administrative issuances intended to enforce existing laws are mandatory for the effectivity of said issuances. Failure to observe the proper requirements makes administrative issuances to have no force and effect. Maliwanag. Ngayon, ito na malala, Mr. President. The COVID-19 budget and releases versus the PhilHealth's own estimate of COVID-19 response cost for 2020. As of June 9, 2020, the total IRM releases amount to 14 billion 38 million 393,329 pesos and 14 centavos. Disaggregated as follows. The hospital clarification, you will see on the board, level 1, 244 of them, 2.3 billion. Level 2, 185 of them, 4.1 billion. Level 3 hospitals, 92 of them, 7 billion, 7.1 billion. Freestanding dialysis, 48 of them, 226 million. Maternity care package, 4 of them, 4,772,000. Infirmaries, 59, 136,907,000 plus. On another exasperating discovery, PhilHealth made a huge mistake when its planned disbursement for IRM COVID was way higher than its assumptions of how many patients to eventually cover. The IRM allocations far exceeded the estimated cost of COVID-19 hospital admissions, Mr. President. PhilHealth estimated 209,000 COVID-19 cases for 2020. About 20% of the COVID cases develop difficulty breathing and require hospital care, as suggested by WHO. The breakdown of the COVID patients by case type, according to DOH, mild 90.3%, severe 0.9%, critical 0.6%. The total estimated cost of COVID in 2020, according to them, is 3.3 billion pesos. Critical 986,000, severe 627,000, mild 1.6 billion. Total 3,301,000 plus. PhilHealth estimated 3.3 billion for the cost of COVID for the entire 2020. Pero Mr. President, ang budget na nilagay nila ay 26.8 billion pesos as of June 9, 2020. 14 billion pesos already were released. Ang layo. Saan napunta? Why did it do so? This bolsters the argument that the 90-day historical claims of hospitals as metrics was not really based on facts, but on surmises plucked from ether. Now, moving on to the questionable IRM fund releases to HCIs, as I mentioned earlier. Invalid and irregular IRM fund. That's as of June 9, 2020, as far as their releases are concerned. There are 339 HCIs which received IRM funds amounting to more than 8.8 million, in addition to several other HCIs that received various amounts under this program. You will see on the board the hospital classification and the number of HCIs and the funds exceeding 8.8 million. As you browse on it, let me move to the releases to non-COVID facilities. Unlike previous IRM releases to recipient HCIs which sustained damages from fortuitous events, there was no set criteria on which HCI will receive IRM funds. Lack of such qualifiers would mean that the funds were either indiscriminately distributed or that the agency was being generous to the point of being ludicrous. The committee is not adverse to helping these other HCIs. Why not? But they should have been covered by the regular benefit packages of PhilHealth and not through this IRM. It has also been established during the hearings, Mr. President, that the implementation of IRM is questionable after PhilHealth extended the coverage of the IRM distribution to HCI beneficiaries which were not included in the objective set forth in the Circular of PhilHealth 2020-0007.
Kung wala naman kayong kasalanan at wala kayong itinatago, di kayo dapat matakot. Sa mga magnanakaw sa PhilHealth, inuulit ko, hindi natatapos dito sa pagsuspinde o sa pagsibak sa inyo. Siguraduhin namin na mananagot kayo sa batas at makukulong kayo. As long as there are people like you in government, we will not stop in our efforts to remove rotten eggs like you who are destroying public service and the public's trust in government. Sabi ko nga noon, kung hindi lang magagalit ang mga human rights advocates, dapat pilayan o putulin ang daliri o kamay ng mga korap para matigil na talaga ang kalokohan. Kung may reklamo ang human rights advocate sa aking rekomendasyon, welcome naman po kayong tumulong sa laban na ito. Kung willing po sila, pwede rin po silang magbigay ng rekomendasyon kung paano paandarin at linisin ng PhilHealth. Aside from fighting for human rights, I urge you to also look into the other rights of our people. Karapatan rin ng Pilipino na mabuhay ng tahimik at yung pera nila ay walang masasayang o mananakaw dahil sa korupsyon. Ang pinaglalaban ko dito ay ang karapatan ng bawat Pilipino na dapat mabigyan ng assurance na ang pera nila ay nagagamit sa tama, nararamdaman nila sa pamamagitan ng maayos na serbisyo at hindi po mananakaw sa mga kurakot dyan. Let this also be a warning sa mga magnanakaw sa iba't ibang ahensya. Lalabas at lalabas rin po ang katotohanan. Ang walang katapusang korupsyon ay para rin pong pandemya. Kailangan talaga na magkaroon ng bakuna o gamot na tatalab laban sa sakit na korupsyon na sumisira sa kalidad ng serbisyo at integridad ng gobyerno. Marami naman sa gobyerno na honest at gusto lang po magsilbi sa kanilang kapwa Pilipino. Huwag nating hayaang mahawaan sila ng sakit na ito. I urge my colleagues to continue helping the administration in cleansing government. Kung may nakikita po kayong katiwalian, ilabas natin dito. Hindi tayo nagtatapos sa PhilHealth lamang. May mga iba't ibang ahensya pa po dyan na may problema ng korupsyon sa loob at sa baba. Tuluyan na natin. Let us work together to get to the bottom of this. Those from the executive, those from the legislative, even those in the judiciary, magtulungan na lang po tayo. We need a whole of nation approach in order to give Filipinos the kind of service they deserve. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Go.
Mga ka-DDS, sana nasatisfy kayo sa panonood ng napakahabang Senate report. If you like my video, please don't forget to like, share, comments, and even subscribe. Share po natin ang todong-todo or bonggang-bongga upang mamulat pong ating mga kababayan sa mga kaganapan, lalong-lalo ng issue ng corruption or evil and fraud sa mga sangay ng gobyerno sa ating pamahalaan. Isa pong maraming salamat, magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Saludo po ako sa inyong mga ka-DDS at saludo rin po ako sa Senate report na nangyari kamakailan lang. Marami pong salamat.